This is a live recording that we're doing with Baba Jackson from Rainbow Consult and Keith Garden from Stratagem Training. My name is Vibrant Gansevoort, and I will also be taking you through the live training during the site workshop on SME governance and anti-corruption. Baba will be talking to us today about training and coaching skills and how do you train and coach entrepreneurs. Baba, without further ado, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vibrant, and thank you all for having me here. I think we'll just go straight into our agenda for today. So you're very welcome. Welcome once again to this session on training and coaching skills. We are expecting that this session will last approximately 1 hour. I'm expecting that this will be a 1 hour session. And so my name is Baba Jackson, as Vibrant mentioned. I am a workplace learning consultant, and I am also a partner of a firm based in Accra, Ghana, called Rainbow Consult. And Rainbow Consult is proud, very proud, to be site partners in Ghana. And we are so very excited to be part of this project. And so on the screen, you have my email address as well as my phone number. My lines and my email is always open. They're always open to you. So feel free to contact me with any questions that you may have that may not be addressed in this session. Vibrant mentioned that we have Keith and himself on this call, so I'd like to give them the opportunity. Maybe Vibrant has introduced himself, so I'd like to give Keith the opportunity to give a short introduction of himself, and then we will look at our objectives for this session. So over to you, Keith.
Thank you, Baba. So my name's Keith, and I'm part of the CVC team that was involved in developing this little module. And my day job is doing a lot of financial training, a lot of focus on governance, roles and duties of directors, things like that. So it was great to be involved in the project, and I'm looking forward to spending an hour with Baba.
Thank you so much, Keith. And Vibrant, we already know you. So hi, Vibrant.
Hello.
And we will go straight into our session objectives. We've talked about the fact that we'll be going to look at training and coaching skills. So we have to ask ourselves this question now. What is our final destination? What do we hope to achieve by the end of this session? And by the end of this 1 hour session, you should be able to explain how to effectively ask and answer questions during your training sessions. You should also be able to explain what coaching means. And so we're going to look a bit about how do I get the best out of my participants during a training session, and then how do I coach them after the training session. And so we'll also look at 2 benefits of coaching for you as a consultant. You should be able to employ the EDAC model to teach SMEs a new skill. And by a new skill, we're talking about all these skills that you will also be learning at this TOT. You should also be able to employ the FBI model to provide feedback to SMEs. How are we going to get to this final destination? What is our content for this session? We will look at questioning. We'll also look at the role of coaching in boosting performance. We shall also look at the EDAC model, which is explain, demonstrate, apply, and consolidate. So we'll take a deeper look at that model. We will also take a deeper look at the FBI model, which is facts, behavior, and impact. And this FBI model will be used in providing feedback that improves the performance of the SMEs that we work with. And so knowing what we are going to be tackling today, I'd like to ask Vibrant and Keith to share with us shortly 1 key objective. What is your expectation? What do you want to be your main takeaway at the end of this session?
Keith, if you want to go first.
Let me go first. Okay. What I'd really like to learn is the techniques that might work best for these business owners who might not really believe they need to be getting trained. We're going to have to train them, but they might not be that, they might have been required to do the training and they don't realize the benefits. So I think that might be a challenge for all of us.
Thank you so much, Keith. Vibrand?
Yeah, I would agree with Keith. I think, what makes the difference between a business owner and an employee working for a large corporate, and how do you train a business owner versus an employee? I think that's one of the big objectives.
Yeah, maybe they're the same. I don't know, but
Yes.
that's what I guess we're going to find out.
Yeah, we will find out. We'll be looking in detail of how to question, because sometimes we can ask questions that will put our participants off in a training session. So we'll be looking in depth how to draw out information from our participants. And once we're engaging our participants, they'll be interested in what we are saying and they'll be more open to the ideas that we present. So we'll be looking at how to ask questions and how to elicit answers. We'll also be looking a bit at how to answer some of these questions. And then we will look at, after training, what next in our consultancy. So we'll pick up a few tips for the consulting part of our business. And that is when we will talk about the coaching. And so I'd like to ask you, gentlemen, again, giving me a number just a number will do, from 1 to 10. How confident are you in your training and coaching skills? 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. Just a number.
Vibrant, you go first.
I'd probably say as 8, Baba. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Vibrant.
I'm kind of there, 7 and 8. Training, very, very comfortable with that. Coaching is something that I haven't done as much of as I've done training. So yeah, I'd say I'm probably about a 7.
Thank you so much, Keith. Thank you, gentlemen. We will come back at the end of the session and we will this was just a brief temperature check. And so we'll take our temperature again to see how beneficial this session has been to all of us. And so we will move straight into our first session for the day. And in this session, we will be talking about questioning techniques. And so for this portion on questioning techniques, we ask ourselves again, what are our objectives? What is the final destination that we hope to have reached by the time this session is over? We hope that you should be able to explain how to effectively ask and answer questions. And you should also be able to describe and employ 6 questioning techniques. So what is our roadmap? What is the content that will lead us to this final destination? We'll be looking at questioning. We will simply be looking at questioning and all that there is to do with questioning. We will also be looking at open and closed questions. And then we shall also look at the 6 questioning techniques, as well as tips for answering and asking questions, and the don'ts when asking or answering questions. So that's what we will be doing today. And we will move straight into a sort of a first activity for the day. And we bandy this out a lot. We talk a lot about how we have closed questions and we have open questions. And so now we are going to practice how to convert closed questions to open questions. And so this is how this activity will go, gentlemen. I will mention a question. I'll have a statement which will be in question form. And then you would tell me how you would convert that question to from a closed question to an open question. And I will do one as sort of like an example, and then we will do the next one together. So for me, my question could be, and this is the question, could you apply this concept to your business? As you can see, that will elicit a yes or no answer, yes or no. However, if we were to convert this question to ask, how could you apply this concept to your business? I'm sure we are already beginning to see the ways in which this would lead the SME owner to open up a bit more. And we would learn a lot about the business if we ask this question. We could also ask it in this way. In what ways do you see yourself applying this concept to your business? In what ways, how do you see yourself applying this concept to your business, rather than going and asking, could you apply this question, this concept to your business? And so, gentlemen, I I'm going to go straight and give you your question to turn into an open question. And the question is this: do you use this method in your business now? That's the question. And I'd like to see how you would transform this into an open question.
Baba, I'm thinking in the context of anti-corruption as well, the training that you do, and what you mentioned is so important. So could you apply this, corporate governance method to your business? Or
Yes.
could you apply this, code
Policy
of conduct or whatever to your business?
Exactly.
Right. So a key thing would possibly be to say how, and change that into how would we apply this to our business? How would you apply this to your business? What changes would you make to apply this to your business to get more involvement?
You are so spot on. And one thing that we need to remember as we are going into these businesses is the fact that once we start talking about anti-bribery and corruption and compliance, I'm sure many of you would have realized that people tend to be defensive and they tend to close off. And so questioning and making our questions more open will lead to, sort of breaking the ice, and it's a less defensive stance. It's a less aggressive, if I may use that word. It's a less aggressive way of asking a question, and you are more likely to get honest answers when you phrase your questions this way. And so now that we have started thinking already about what open and closed questions are, I would like to now move on and ask you, gentlemen, do you have any idea based on this activity that we just had? What do you think open questions are, and what do you think closed questions are? Because we've had this activity and now we are thinking about the different types of questions. So what do you think open questions are, and what do you think closed questions are?
Well, I'm thinking that open questions you cannot answer by just saying yes or no. You have to explain something. You have to respond with some answer that's not yes or no. And I think there's a place for both. But if you want to start a discussion, you're not going to get there with closed questions.
Keith, you are so right. You're so spot on. And it's almost like you were thinking what I was thinking. You are right. Closed questions, they elicit a single response, yes or no. But open questions, they try to probe and find out about knowledge, opinions, and feelings. And so,
Baba, sorry if I can jump in for a second. I'm just also thinking, the role of the facilitator really also needs to be almost one step further as well, to say, what business is the entrepreneur in? So that when you apply the question, the open or the closed questions, you're actually applying it directly to that business as well.
Thank you so much, Vibrant. You're spot on, because I was just moving to that, and we were saying that closed questions are typically questions used to direct the conversation. So, sometimes when we are having conversations with people or in class, some people seem to be going off, a bit off the topic. And so in that situation, you can ask them closed questions to sort of direct the conversation and bring everybody home. And then you then ask open questions when you want more information about a participant who is maybe on the right track, or you want to probe to find out what those practices that the participant engages in are. And so there is a time and a place for both open and closed questions. But what was important to us as facilitators is knowing when to apply open and closed questions. So you might say, I was having this conversation and I didn't get any answers. It may be that you were asking only closed questions, and so they were very directed. You may also say, we had a very long conversation, and when I went back and reviewed my notes, I realized that I didn't really get any of the answers that I was seeking. And that may be because you were asking too many open questions in class. Especially in a training session, it may make the class drag on and on longer than it should because there's no direction. So as a facilitator, it is our job to find out the sweet spots between when to ask closed questions and when to ask open questions. Now that we have
I like what you said, if I may interrupt you. You also
Yes.
said, when you want to find out information, that I forget the 3 words that you used, but one of them was feelings also, and to
knowledge,
say to
opinions, and feelings.
and feelings.
Knowledge,
So
opinions.
knowledge, opinions is usually what we focus on. But feelings is also so nice, because you can say to an entrepreneur, how do you feel about governance in your little business? And the guy might, I think it's a waste of time. I don't see how it fits in. So I feel I'm wasting my time here. And straight away, exactly where he's coming from, or he feels very excited. So I like that, asking a question, how do you feel about it? Not just what do you think, or, tell us about this or that, but also asking how people feel directly is a very nice way of unlocking exactly that.
You are so right, Keith, especially with the work that we do. We will have to be very tactical when talking to our participants, because sometimes we deal with very sensitive topics. And so you are spot on. You are spot on. And actually, leading us to this is we're going to talk about how to ask questions. And this is a model for questioning that is on your screen. And I'm just going to speak to it while you have the time to sort of study it. And what this model is basically teaching us is that when you do not get an answer, you have to find a way of rephrasing your question. So it may not be that the SME does not know the answer, or does not have an idea, or may not even be applying whatever concepts that we are talking about, but we may have to go back and rephrase the question. And so we have to ask ourselves, for example, when you ask a question, I can ask the SME, how do you apply a code of conduct to your business? After I pause, there may be no answer. You need to give the SME time to think about whoever in a classroom situation, for example. You need to give your participants time to think of a good answer to your question. And so when you ask a question, usually we recommend that you count in your head 10 seconds before you say anything else. And that 10-second period gives your participants sort of the time and space to formulate answers in their mind. So if after this 10 seconds there's no answer, then you rephrase. You ask yourself, what are the values that guide your conduct as a business? Do you have any of these written down anywhere? And you may realize that they do have a code of conduct, but they do not know that it's called a code of conduct. And you may not have gotten this answer if you had not paused to rephrase your answer. And once you get an answer, you have to make sure you are listening, not just hearing. And then you interpret the answer. So you ask yourself, if I am to understand what you ask the participants, if I'm to understand what you are saying, you mean A, B, C. And then the person acknowledges, and then you respond again. And so this is just a useful model for reminding us, especially the importance of rephrasing our questions when we have no answer. Now we move straight to, there are some techniques for questioning. There are very little tricks so that we don't ask the same kinds of questions all the time in our training room, because that may be a bit monotonous if we ask the same kind of questions all the time. And so we are going to introduce ourselves to what we like to call 6 questioning techniques. And these 6 questioning techniques are the group technique, the relay technique, the pause, and pick. That's called PPP technique, the reflect technique, the reverse technique, as well as the Socratic technique. And right off the bat, I'll tell you that my favorite questioning technique is the Socratic technique. But let us look deeper into what each of these techniques entails, and we'll start with the group technique. And so for the group technique, the trainer asks a question to the whole group and then waits for a volunteer to answer. And this is best during a learning phase. And so a group technique is, you can ask a question to the whole class while you stand in the front of the class. Maybe before you teach, or during, or or after you teach maybe the importance of a compliance program. And so this is the point where you stand in front of the class and then you ask them a question. For example, what is the importance of having a compliance program for SMEs? For this, anybody in the class can, sort of lift up their hands and give an answer. The problem with this is that it's possible that no one will answer your question. And what do you do when no one answers? I'd like to know from you, Keith. Do you have and Vibran, do you have an idea of what you could do, suggestions? What can you do when no one answers your question?
So, Baba, I'm just thinking while you're talking as well, what I've realized during anti-corruption training is your role as a trainer is twofold. You need to communicate knowledge, right? So that's the one. But you've got an even bigger role, and that role is to change behavior. And that's such a difficult thing to do in a training context, right? So one of the things that you don't want to do is you don't want to come across as Mr. Know-it-all. So in this technique that you're talking about now, the importance is that the group knows a lot of the answers, right? And what you want to do is you want to feed off the other participants in order to give the answers to some of the other participants. So, back to your question, what do I do? I might change an open question to a closed question. So you might say, how are you feeling today? And nobody answers because they're really feeling bad about it. And you might then say, okay, give me on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel? And now it's easier for them. Now it's a closed question. Now it's easier for them to say a 6 or a 4 or whatever else.
You are so spot on. When no one answers, you can, you're right, redirect. We've already learned about open and closed questions. So you are so right. We employ a mixture of both open and closed, even using this group and all these other techniques that we will talk about. And so you can do that. And what you can also do is, remember we talked about rephrasing a question when no one has an answer. And so in a situation like that, you might find out, and that is what I find a lot also in my training for anti-corruption, that once you rephrase the question, sort of like light bulbs start to click and people start to sort of want to engage and answer. So that is definitely something that we can do. And then we move to the next technique, which is also something you can do if no one is answering in sort of like a situation where you have a group. And that is the relay technique. And in this technique, it's sort of like really like a relay race. So it's sort of like you have a baton, which is the question, and you're just passing it around to the participants. So you ask the same or similar questions to several participants in time. And you can use this question anytime. And so even when you ask a group question and no one answers, you can quickly either rephrase or pivot your questioning technique to ask a relay question. And so an example is, how do you feel about whistleblowers? And maybe you have 4 or 5 participants at the table, and you say, I will ask this question to participants on table 5. I will start with you, Keith, on my left, and I will end with you, Vibrand, on my right. And Keith, when you are ready, please give your answer. And then it goes on and on and on from there. You will see that there's a caution when using this technique, which is that participants may feel pressure to answer and they may feel anxiety, which is why we like to give them sort of like a heads up in such a situation. So I say, I'll start with you, Keith, on my right, and end with you, Vibrand, on my left. And then you say, Keith, please feel free to answer. Please answer whenever you are ready. And so it sort of takes the pressure off the participant to provide an answer immediately you finish talking. Then they can provide an answer in their own time. And then you also make sure that then most people, it's a way of making sure that maybe some people who are not participating or are too shy to speak up in class get a chance to do so. So that's the relay technique. And one of my favorites, this is the pause and pick technique. And with this technique, the trainer, you ask a question to the group. So you're standing maybe in front or the middle of the class. You pose a question to the group. Then you pause, which is that you're giving them some time to gather themselves. And then you nominate a learner by name to answer.
You know, Baba, sorry, can I jump in for a second? And I think
Please.
I was taught this technique by Keith, you know, to have something in the class called name cards. And I think there's a book written some time ago which says, you know, one of the most powerful holds you could have over a person is their name. Right. Now, I think it's important for us as trainers to realize you could call a person by their name, right? It is possible, and they won't feel offended, right? And it
Thank you so
helps
much.
to narrow in that conversation to that person.
Thank you so much. You are so right. And because nobody knows who you're going to pick, everybody's thinking about an answer. So it's also a way of engaging your participants in a class, because I don't know if I'll be called. And so the caution again is with these techniques is that there might be pressure and they may not be prepared to be called upon. And so, like with the relay technique, you take pressure off them by telling your participants to answer when they are able. And what we like to do, because you know you are picking someone, is that we like to make it a game. And so we say that if you cannot answer the question, you have 3 people to call for a lifeline
Nice.
before you die. And that also even sort of breaks the ice and sort of encourages participation, because now everybody has perked up because you don't know if your colleague in class is going to call you as their lifeline. So this is a way of engaging all participants in class, especially when we may be talking about things that they don't want to talk about. You know, Vibrant, you mentioned
Or
how
that's unfamiliar to them. Hey,
exactly.
I think also I think it's also important when Vibrant and I have been doing a lot of this Zoom training over the last year, as have you probably, Baba. And because of the technology, and it's wonderful technology, but it does give people the opportunity to hide behind a blank screen and not to respond. And so it's also, from a trainer's point of view, often very difficult to draw people out and get them to participate. And it is hell of a useful when I know Baba will answer. If I ask her, if I pick on her, she's going to at least give me an answer. And at least then, you know, even if I have to pick on her more than I'd like to, it gives me some activity going on, as opposed to just me banging on and not getting anyone else involved.
Yes.
So it's
You are
always nice to.
Sorry, you're spot on, Keith. And we are moving very quickly to what is one of my favorite techniques. You will realize that adult learners, most of the time, they come to the class with a wealth of experience. They may not know the technical terms for the things that we are teaching them, but they have very good ideas about the concepts that we are showing. And we may have people in our classes that are maybe lawyers, or they deal with accounting and finance. And so in their everyday job, they deal with these compliance issues. So we may have experts amongst us in a class. And so with this reflect technique, as well as the reverse, which we'll be looking at after this, you are able to take advantage of the experienced learners in your class, so that people are not bored, and also so that you do not speak. You are not the only, resource person and expert speaking all the time during your training session, because that can get monotonous. So a question from the learner to the trainer is either opened up to the rest of the group or to an experienced learner. And so you may be in a class and the learner might ask, what are the benefits of reducing corruption in business transactions beyond attracting multinational companies? And you may have experienced participants in your class whom you know will know the answer. And so you may just say, how about I throw this question back to the class? Who would like to answer this question? And if there's no answer, or if there's no answer, you can rephrase. And after rephrasing, if there's no answer, well, then you are the facilitator. And so then it is your duty to answer that question. But this technique, every time I've used it, it works. It works because as a facilitator, you should also be skilled in, sort of figuring out who is at what level in your class, especially because maybe you get a profile of the participants before the class comes in. And even during your teaching, looking at some sort of, examples and contributions that participants give, you can have a good idea of who can give a satisfactory answer towards. And I like this technique a lot because it encourages peer learning, and peer learning is, unbeatable. And so we move quickly to reverse questioning, which is like the reflex, except that with the reverse, you pose the question back to the learner who asked it. You rephrase it and you pose it back to the learner. I must say that this should be used with care because participants may lose confidence in the trainer if you overuse it. While it builds confidence in your participants and it encourages them to think for themselves, if all the time you are reflecting or reversing questions, you lose credibility as someone who knows the answers to the questions that they may be posing. And so, it's all about striking, the right balance when using these techniques. But there are 6 of them. And so it's good to have them in your arsenal. And then you decide when and how and where to sort of like deploy these questions. We also have Socratic questioning technique. And this is sort of just like the Socratic way of thinking and the Socratic philosophy, where a question from the trainer is asked with a softening clue in it. And so it's sort of like you keep on probing and you keep on heading the participants till they come to sort of like a conclusion. A short word of caution for this learning technique is that it is not for a recap. You don't use this technique when you are recapping a conversation that has been had. And so we'll go through very quickly a few tips that we have for answering questions. And it's actually in a mnemonic, and it is listen. Let the participants feel your interest through verbal and nonverbal reinforcement. So make eye contact with them through body language, be open rather than closed, have a smile. And also you can verbally reinforce the questions. You can say, I get that, nodding. Show interest in your participants when they are asking questions. You can also inquire with further questions as necessary. So you confirm any ideas that you may have, and you also sort of like, you confirm what you have and you probe for better clarifications on the concepts or the parts of the questions that you don't understand. The next and very important thing we talked about is that stay on target. You need to remember the point of the conversation and the question. As a facilitator, it is your job to make sure that the objectives of the session are met. So when you are answering questions, make sure you stay on target, you test your understanding. So you can't keep on asking questions and saying, rephrasing the question. You say, what I understand by what you are saying is A, B, C, D. You need to evaluate the message. Is it an emotional question? Is it a logical question this person is asking? Is this person asking the question because they are anxious about money? Evaluate the spirit, sort of, with which this participant has asked you their question. And it's very important to make your participants feel comfortable and confident in asking you questions. You need to always, always, always neutralize your feelings. Now that we've talked about tips for asking questions, I'll just leave you with a few tips also for answering questions. Be clear and concise. Pause to give participants time to think. When we spoke about this, give them 10 seconds. Rephrase the question if you do not receive an answer from your participants. We've talked about that also. You use closed and open questions to manage the discussion. We've talked extensively about this. Ask an individual by name if appropriate. This is just a summary of what we've talked about. Prompt answers by linking if necessary. You can link one concept to another to help your participants to make the connection between what you are saying. Some don'ts when you're answering a question. Don't argue with your participant, please. It tends to antagonize them. And we are there to give information. So we need our participants to be open as possible.
Baba, maybe if we can just pause on that for a second. There will be times when your participants will be asking you challenging questions. And they will challenge you in sometimes because they have some other intent in mind. Right. So I've had tough conversations in class around corruption and anti-corruption. I've had participants who have challenged corruption and anti-corruption, right? Have said things like, you know what, how do we get business? You know, you're telling us that we should be anti-corrupt here. How do we get business then? Right? And I think what you are saying here is, you're saying it's not the job of the facilitator to necessarily argue it. What is a good idea at that stage is to pass the baton and to actually get other people to start contributing to that conversation. Because I haven't done one training session so far where the consensus in the room hasn't been, actually, we need to do something about corruption, right?
Exactly.
Where the participants haven't said, corruption is wrong, we need to stop corruption from taking place, and it affects everybody in the room, right?
It's a spot on, you are right. And a lot of the time, what we like to say after we throw it back, you know, you do have some adamant participants. What we like to say is, well, this is what we know, this is what has been working for us and our clients, this is what is internationally recommended. But I'm a facilitator, I am here to give you knowledge. And so we can agree to disagree, or you can agree to take the part of my presentation that you like, and I'm here to make suggestions to make your business better. You know, so you can diffuse the situation in a very non-threatening way to say, we can leave this, and maybe we can talk about this later if you want, or we can just drop this matter altogether.
Absolutely.
And so there's that, and in the spirit of that, don't allow one person to keep asking questions all the time. And also, very, 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 very importantly, don't adopt a patronizing or berating tone. And what I mean by this is, you can say something like, as I already said, you know, maybe a participant is asking a question which you've answered already. We are in class to learn. And so it's a very important thing not to say things like, as I already said, or you should know the answer to that, or it is obvious that, or how can you ask such a stupid question? You know, that's all sorts of like, there's no stupid question in any class. Every question is an opportunity to learn. And it's important that as a facilitator, you believe that. You know, it's important that you just don't say that and model other behavior with maybe your body language, but it's important that you are open to questions and you don't patronize your participants. They may not return to your classroom if you do that.
Absolutely. I think, Baba, we've had it so often when training trainers that you get a couple of types. You get the teachers who can't help themselves. They've got to answer every question that's asked instead of throwing it back to the class. They've got to tell. And then you get the preacher who is very passionate about their subject and can't help themselves. All their opinions come through, and you get the content, but it's loaded with all sorts of personal stuff.
You are so right.
And it's very difficult. And when we're training trainers, that's one thing. If you do that, we will not certify you. You are the least important person in
your
the room.
training room.
You are
Exactly.
humble. You are before people who you know probably know more than you do about lots of things. You happen to maybe be an expert at this little thing that you're helping them with today, but you know you are not. You know, it doesn't give you any right to assume anything about how much they know or how much you know.
You are so spot on. So moving quickly
Difficult.
through moving quickly through some other don'ts. Don't put people on the spot, and we've talked about how to mitigate against that. Don't adopt defensive body language, because body language speaks volumes. And so always be open to your participants. So that brings us to the end of this session. And so I'd like to ask you to share with me, maybe with 2 words, what your key learning for this session has been. So Keith and Vibrand, if you'd like to go first when you're ready. If you share with me in two words, your key learning for this session.
Baba, I would agree with that, to say participate, right, and engage. I think that would be my two words.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vibrant.
I think for me, it's listen. Your acronym, which once again brings out the good facilitator behavior, and ask, and respect all the answers, and also just, as an aside, you're not supposed to know the answers to everything. If you don't know the answer, it doesn't matter. You can always throw it back to the room. You'll get help there. And if nobody knows, say, fine, great question. We can come back to you on that. Nobody knows what the answer is. We'll put that on a parking lot somewhere and we'll deal with it later.
Thank you so much. You are also spot on. And once we've discussed what our key learnings are, let us remind ourselves of what we said we would do at the beginning of this session. We said we'd explain how to effectively ask and answer questions. Have we been able to do that?
Yes.
Thank you so much. We also said we'll be able to describe the 6 questioning techniques. Have we been able to do that?
Yes.
Thank you so much. And at this point, if we've been able to, sort of do all the things that we said we would do, what are the questions, comments, or clarifications that you may require for this session before we move quickly into a few tips for coaching?
None from me, Baba. I think it's it's very clear.
My question is, who put that question mark there in the middle of the sea?
I think it's so as
a
that
nice
questions
picture.
can be so peaceful. It's such a peaceful, chill-looking question time, which is what we sort of want to evoke here. And if there are no questions, comments, or clarifications, now that we have talked about some skills for asking and answering questions in the classroom, let's go out of the classroom and into our consultancy practices. And when we are consulting for these ABAC issues with SMEs, how do we go about it? How do we do this coaching? And so we're talking about coaching very quickly. And I'd like to start this session with a quote by Bob Nadelli, who is the former CEO of Home Depot and Chrysler. And I agree. He says that people, unless coached, hardly reach their maximum capabilities. And so SMEs, unless coached, will hardly reach their maximum capabilities for compliance and anti-bribery and corruption. And so that's some food for thought for us as we go through this session. What do we hope to achieve by the end of the session? You should be able to define coaching at work. You should also be able to explain some benefits of coaching for yourself as a consultant. You should also be able to employ the EDAC model to teach SMEs a new skill. And you also should be able to employ the FBI model to give feedback to SMEs. And how will we get to this final destination? We'll be looking at the content. The content for this session will be the role of coaching in boosting performance. Then we will delve straight into the EDAC model. Then we will look at the FBI model. What are the benefits of this session? The benefits is that we'll be able to improve the performance of the staff of the SMEs that we work with. We'll be able to build the confidence of SMEs because coaching is so hands-on and it is like working while you're doing, learning through activity. And so that will build the confidence of our SMEs, and we will also be able to refine the skills that they already have. So we move straight into this session and we talk about what coaching is. And the first thing I think about when I think about coaching is like maybe a football coach or like a tennis coach. And that's the visual that I want us to always have in our minds when we think about coaching. And coaching is a form of training that allows the consultant to enhance an SME skills by treating real work as a learning opportunity. And so when you are coaching, you are helping your SMEs to refine skills. You're also correcting any mistakes that they may have or any mistakes that they may have been doing using the skills that they already have. And so coaching is very, very much on the job. And this brings us to the difference between coaching and training. Coaching is in the workplace and it is linked directly with a job or task, while training tends to be broader and it's not really linked to a specific job. Coaching is intended to improve performance, because it is so task related and so granular. So with coaching, we are already maybe improving your performance on some skills or knowledge that you have. And where would you gain that skills or knowledge? You can gain that in a training room. So while training adds or enhances skills or knowledge, coaching is rather involved in improving the performance, sort of the application of those skills and knowledge that you do have. And then we go quickly and talk about a benefit of coaching for you as a consultant. It will improve the performance of your SMEs, and also it enhances your reputation. Imagine being known as the consultant who sort of, gets results. And how do you get results? Like any person who enters Keith's training room is always doing perfectly on the job. And that's because Keith is on hand to do the consulting part of the business and also handhold these SMEs. And so then you have a good reputation for getting things done. And we've talked about this. It also refines the skills of SMEs, it builds their confidence, and it encourages proactivity. And now we go straight into the two skills and tools that we talked about. But before we go into EDAC and FBI, let us look at when do we use coaching? Because we talked about it, but when do we use it? We use coaching when the SME does not know how best to perform the job. So I may have an idea about it, but I don't know what the best practices are. And so I come into your office and I hold your hand and show you how best to perform that job. How best do I perform a risk assessment? I'll sit with you and coach you through the steps of a risk assessment. I'll sit by you and coach you through writing a gift policy or policies and procedures manuals. It helps you use coaching also when your SME needs to develop some critical skills and if they have little experience with a particular job. And I feel like a lot of the SMEs that we may be working with will have maybe limited experience with these compliance and anti-bribery and corruption systems that we put in place. So it's very important that we understand how to use coaching. We also use coaching when SMEs lack confidence on how to solve the problem and when they fail to do the job as required. So looking at EDAC, which is how to teach SMEs a new skill, and EDAC stands for explain, demonstrate, apply, and consolidate. And so you explain, you demonstrate, you apply, and then you consolidate. What do we mean by explain? What do we mean when we say explain? You explain the purpose of whatever task, and then you explain the process. So explanation is sort of like the introduction. You give a brief overview of what you are about to do. Then you actually demonstrate and take that step. You demonstrate each step that must be taken. You identify the skills, the steps, or the key ideas, and then you show them how they are sure that they've done it well. You provide a criteria. This is very important in this stage, to provide a criteria for assessment. Then you respond to any questions that they may have, and then you share past experiences. So this is a very important stage where you answer all questions and you share past experiences. Then after that, it's time for the SME to apply. And so you help the SME to repeat this process. You give them multiple opportunities for practice. Then you don't just leave them, you follow up to monitor process. And in the following up, that is when we get to the consolidation stage, where you allow the SME to draw experience from the application phase to build confidence. So in this stage, it is important that you allow the SME to do a self-assessment of their achievements and also the areas where they need to improve. And then you develop a plan of action with the SME. So that's it. You explain, you demonstrate, you apply, and then you consolidate, where you have evaluated the performance and you have a plan of action. And so, as you can see, you keep on going back and forth between the application, the explanation, the application, and the consolidation stage. Because you might realize at the consolidation stage that they didn't grasp a certain part of the explanation. And so then you come back and explain, then they apply and you consolidate. So it's a back and forth between the application and consolidation and explanation when you get to the consolidation stage. So once you get to the consolidation stage, you might go and apply again, or you might have to go back and explain again. Here are some common mistakes of coaching. Sometimes we teach too little or too much at a time. And so we have to learn how to strike that balance. Sometimes we provide inadequate demonstration. Sometimes we just are not patient enough with the SMEs that we are coaching. And importantly, sometimes we are not prepared enough. When you are not prepared enough, you might not be able to explain well, you might not be able to demonstrate well, and so they will not be able to apply, and you will also fail your SMEs at the consolidation stage. So you need to make sure that you plan well for your coaching sessions. And a tense learning environment. Sometimes, I don't know, have any of you, Keith, Vibran, been in an environment that was so tense that you were not even able to ask questions? You know, you were so unapproachable.
I think, Baba, I think every trainer, if they train long enough, is going to find themselves in an environment like that. And I think it is important to kind of, you know, realize that as such. Yes, and you need to be open to kind of, you know, change the rules or reflect back at the rules.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Vibrant. And sometimes we create that tense learning environment without knowing. Maybe you're having a bad day, and so you don't look as open, you're not smiling as much, you know. So we have to make sure that we also do not create a tense learning environment for our participants and the people that we coach, because that will hinder effectiveness when we are coaching.
Papa, maybe just a second to go back to the training module, you know, and I think what is important is that as the trainer, what we do before a training session starts is we determine a social contract between everybody in the room. And, you know, something, especially with entrepreneurs, is something like phones. And a question, because when you're dealing with entrepreneurs, these are individuals that have very important phone calls to make, right? They could lose business based on not picking up the phone or not. So it's not necessarily the same rules that you would apply when you're talking to an employee. With an employee, you could close the door. You can say, everybody, today we concentrate on work. The entrepreneur in the back of the head, work is running around. So you need to be patient enough to be able to be at the place of the entrepreneur and think through their situation as such. But given that, some individuals can also be disruptive. And you might need to refer back to the social contract and say, look, guys, we've contracted respect during the session. I understand your points of agreement between participants in the session, but let's get back to what we're talking about.
Exactly, you are so spot on. And normally coaching sessions are not even held in the training room, so it's easier to establish that social contract one-on-one with whomever you may be coaching in the organization, you know, whether at your office or in theirs or virtually. I think that is also something that helps. And another mistake is inadequate encouragement and also insufficient feedback. And so we'll be very quickly looking at how to provide feedback to SMEs, so we don't make that mistake of insufficient feedback. Present the facts. It's very important that you present the facts, and so that's where this FBI model comes. It stands for facts, behavior, impact. Present the facts, describe a specific behavior, and then clearly identify the impact of that behavior when giving feedback. And effective feedback always must have clear objectives. Before giving feedback, you should define the purpose clearly. Feedback that is motivated by anger or impulse is unlikely to have a positive impact on your participants. Also, make sure you give the feedback at the right time. It is important that you give the feedback soon after the event occurs. If you give a feedback too long after an event has occurred, you might not have the best results. It is also important that you ensure that the SME understands the feedback that you are giving. And you can do this through asking questions, and we've talked at length about asking questions. So you can probe to ensure that the SME understands the feedback that you've given. And this is of the utmost importance. You have to make sure that your feedback is calm, clear, fair, and objective, especially when you're given negative feedback. It has to be fair as well as objective. It also has to focus on issues that the SMEs can control. What is in their circle? What are the things that they can control? When you're giving feedback to SMEs, especially in the kind of work that we do, make sure it is actionable, not something that is above them or something that is maybe government policy, which they can't do anything about. Give them feedback about company policy, which they can make changes about. Also consider the opinions of your recipients when you're giving feedback. You are there to help them make their companies better. So it's important that you consider their opinions when you're giving them feedback. And use both verbal and non-verbal cues. Smile, nod, gesticulate with your hands. Use both verbal and non-verbal cues when giving feedback to your SMEs. So sometimes you can combine these tools that I'm talking about. And when an SME lacks skill, you can combine both the coaching, explain, demonstrate, apply, and consolidate, as well as feedback when the SME purely lacks skill in a coaching situation. However, when the SME lacks confidence, you can apply FBI. When the SME lacks confidence, you can apply the facts, behavior. You can give them feedback. And so you can give them even positive feedback when you see them performing a task well, but you can see that they lack confidence. You can say, you can give them positive feedback about the task that they performed well, that you enjoyed seeing them perform. And to coach successfully, you need to make sure that we are always identifying the needs of our participants. You need a plan for coaching. And we've talked about this. You can't just go in and coach ad hoc without a plan. You need to make sure that this coaching is actually implemented. And once you have a plan, have timelines and deadlines so that you can implement this coaching plan and follow up and provide feedback so that you can be sure that you've actually been beneficial to your SME. And so this brings us to the end of this session also and to our whole 1 hour session. And I'd like to ask you, give me one word each, please, Vibrant and Keith. If I can start with Keith, what is your learning regarding coaching in one word? This session on coaching.
Coaching is about doing.
Thank you so much, Keith. Vibrant?
I would say enabling.
Thank you so much. You are both so spot on. And so let's go back and look at what we wanted to achieve when we started this session. We said we'd define coaching at work. We said that we'd explain benefits of coaching for us as consultants. We also said we'd look at the EDAC model. And we also said that we would also look at how to employ, we'd also look at how to employ the FBI model to provide feedback to SMEs. Have you been able to do all of this, please? I'd like a yes or a no from you, gentlemen.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a nice closed question.
So, to direct the conversation. Because this is the end of the
You don't want a whole conversation now.
No,
Yes.
I just want yes or no. Thank you so much, gentlemen. And that's very, very, very nice linking, Keith. Thank you so much. I'd like to know at this point, what are the questions, the comments, or the clarifications that you may require?
Maybe to say, Baba, it is important that the person implementing, the consultant as such, that you understand when you are operating as a consultant or a coach. And the one thing, and I'm coming back to your training thing, you are not going to be playing the tennis match. Someone else will be playing the tennis match, right? So when it comes to, especially when it comes to anti-corruption, so the idea sometimes is, well, give me my code of conduct, right? And I'll just put my policy in place. But that's not how anti-corruption works, right? Anti-corruption requires that you actually think specific to your company, and that champion, whoever the anti-corruption champion is in that company, actually thinks through, what are the things that places our company at risk? Where are the gaps that we have in our organization? So that they can go about applying that themselves. Whereas if you're the consultant, on the other side, you might just need to write that policy for them. right? So it's important for you to
Yes,
actually
yes,
think through those two
definitely.
roles.
Definitely. Thank you so much. That's spot on. And so this brings us to the end of our session. And I'd like us to very quickly remind ourselves of the things we said we would do when we began an hour ago. We said we'd explain how to effectively ask and answer questions. We said we'd define coaching at work and would explain the benefits of coaching for the consultant, as well as how to employ the EDAC model to teach SMEs a new skill. We said that you should also be able to employ the FBI model to provide feedback to SMEs. I'd like to know a simple yes or no again. Have we been able to achieve all that we set out to achieve?
Absolutely.
I think
Yes.
so. Yes.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. If we have been, I'd like to know from training skills and questioning right down to coaching, what are the questions that you may have at this point?
Baba, I don't think at this stage there's questions, but I think I'm going to throw that back. Maybe one of the skills we've learned, right? And Baba, thank you so much for taking us through this. I think not only have you taught us something now, you've also practiced the process incredibly well and showed us, demonstrated to us how to go about doing that. I think if I can be as bold, Baba, you gave your email details at the beginning. And if someone has
Yes.
questions, would it be possible for them to contact you?
I was about to get to that. So these are my details. I do also have a list of references for you that I'm sure we can share with you. If you don't get that down now, I'm sure we can share through the site office. But these are my contact details. Feel free to contact me anytime at all if you have any questions that have not been answered in this session. And so thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much, Keith and Vibrant, for being such wonderful participants in my class.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.